Well, I'll start by telling you a story. For me, I came, this business conference used to be in August, I think, right, Caleb? And it was called something different. It wasn't called Next Level. And so I've been in financial services since I got out of college. I got a business degree from Texas A&M and started working in kind of Wall Street brokerage firms. Learned a lot about how to help people, learned a lot of what to do and what not to do when it comes to financial services. And several years into that journey, I had a mentor named Lance Wallnow. And if any of you know Lance in the room, that's a double-edged sword if he's a mentor, coach. He was doing a lot of business consulting at the time. It was kind of before he really got huge into politics, and he prophesied that Trump would be president when there was 15 candidates in the Republican convention. And one of the things Lance had told me, he teaches a lot on this concept called the 7 mountains. Mm-hmm. So how many of you are familiar with the 7 mountains? So it is really just saying that the kingdom of God is over everything, but there's different spheres of culture, right? Whether it's the church, family, media, business, government, but all of it is under the kingdom. And so I was sitting with Lance at his house, and Lance is very prophetic. And he has this basement that he's turned into like this huge library. He has more books than I think most public libraries, and he's probably read them all. And so I was in there with him, and Lance, as he tends to do, he just starts getting in the spirit, and he starts prophesying. And he said, Chad, you need to stay in the business mountain, and you need to go up higher to the sphere kind of where the gates are. And you're supposed to meet my cousin Billy. And so then that led to this whole long conversation about, well, is he really your cousin? Is he not your cousin? And so it's like, just trust me, you got to come to this business conference. And it was the precursor to this event. And so so I said, okay, I trust you. I'm gonna lean into this, pray into it with the Lord. And I came and I met Billy, who was actually not his cousin. They were just really good friends. And so fast forward to now, and Billy's a business partner of mine in WealthBuilders Investments. And really what that stirred in me, this was probably 7-8 years ago, was really a desire to apply biblical values into the investment world. And I had been researching it some and dabbling in it a little bit, but the Lord really convicted me that, you don't have to look too far to see what matters most. And so when I looked around at my kids and my family, I started thinking, well, there is a significance to the next generation and what they're going to receive from us, not just financially, but what will be the impact of the decisions we make in business and in investing. And, my daughter, Hannah, my son, Tyler, Hannah is now 7. I think she's 5-ish in that picture. But it was really struck on me that, they're growing up in a culture where so much of the innocence is being attacked by the enemy. And one of the main ways it's done is through money that goes through the financial markets, which I'm going to talk about in this session and in the next session, which will be right after this in the same room. And so it really started me on this journey of, well, if I'm going to be managing money, if I'm going to stay in this industry, there's a lot of benefits to being in financial services. There's a lot of challenges because of just how Wall Street is set up. Then I want to do it with the right alignment, and we say aligning your faith with your finances on that. So that's a big driving force for me in that, how do I raise up my kids to walk in biblical wisdom with money, but also how can I use money now to protect them, to fight for them against some of those forces of evil. A couple of things. I do have a podcast called Kingdom Finance Show. Encourage you to check that out. I would say I'd drop a podcast every week, but that's just not true. That is my goal. But sometimes life gets in the way. But we are trying to do more podcasts there. If you want to know what our view on the economy is, if you want to know what we're thinking about with the markets, with interest rates, if you want to hear from people that we're interviewing that are actually in the world of kingdom finance and hear their success stories, encourage you to check that out. You can snap the QR code. You can look for it on YouTube, Apple Podcast, all the above. Let's jump in. So one of the key things that you've already heard this morning is we are really called to be stewards, managers of God's resources. And you already heard about Deuteronomy 8:18, and just that part of that is how God confirms His covenant. His covenant relationship with us is through stewardship. So one of the ways that the Lord has taught me to learn about money is through other modalities. And so, although I read all the Wall Street stuff, I read all the finance magazines, but sometimes I'm reading something that is not even financial, and the Lord will speak to me and, well, here's some financial wisdom. So I'm a big Dallas Willard fan. I loved following him. These are some quotes from his book, The Scandal of the Kingdom. And a lot of the parables of Jesus, we can relate to stewardship and resource management and how we are taking care of the earth on that. But just to give us a few talking points, God is really guiding us in your own journey to take responsibility of the things of the world, over the goods of this world. And it's better to be in the hands of us who understand that how Christianity works, understands the heart of God. It's better for us to be stewarding those resources than someone who is let's just say godless, right? Who is just looking at how they can pillage the whole world with finances. God really wants resources in the hands of the redeemed, you and I, so that we can partner with Him to redeem the land, right? To redeem the earth. So when we talk about, well, what's the role of money? I love this last quote. It says that, our financial decisions really flow out of discipleship. And so if we're really serious about stewarding finances well or starting businesses, it really needs to flow out of our personal walk with Jesus. So it's through your discipleship, through your relationship with Jesus, that He's going to give you the wisdom on, well, should I do this with this business, or should I invest in a certain way? I want to share a parable, and then I'm going to dive into some of the portfolios, I'm going to do some name dropping here on some public companies, but let me just set the stage here. I want to introduce this concept to you that if you go and read the parables in Matthew 13, the wheat and the tares, the dragnet, some of the other ones, let me give you this phrase. Everything is in the kingdom of God. Can we agree on that? Everything's in the kingdom? But not everything is of the kingdom. So prepositions, I know, I did like English. So when we look at the world, when we look at these parables, the wheat and the tares, they are right beside each other. I have the scriptures, but I won't go through them all just for time's sake. But the wheat and the tares are right beside each other. They're both in the kingdom, but only one of them is of the kingdom. And so when we think about money, we think about the stock market, we think about capital markets, businesses, there are things that are sitting right beside each other, and some of them are just in the kingdom. They're self-serving, they're hedonistic, they're not of the kingdom. And so what the parable teaches us is that we have to do work right beside things that are not of God, just like the wheat and the tares, because in the parable, he says, he asks the manager, should I pull out the weeds? And he says, no, don't pull out the weeds, because you're going to pull out the wheat in the process. Let's wait until the harvest, and then when the harvest comes, then we'll sort out the weeds on that. So to me, that's encouraging, because when I look at what's happening, particularly in Wall Street and a lot of public companies and good grief, social media and TV, I don't even watch that much TV. I'll watch a football game here and there, maybe the World Series coming up here. But there's so much weeds out there that it can become disheartening to us. But our role is to let the wheat, the good work that's of the kingdom, it's going to grow right beside things that have nothing of value alignment with God. So there's two groups of people in the kingdom, two groups of assets, shall we say. We're talking about financial markets today. You have the weeds, the tares. Those are things, assets, people, companies who they're in the kingdom, right? Because everything is under the sovereignty of God, but their character is 100% of the world. And I'm going to share with you a story about Netflix here in a minute. I'm going to pick on them today. But the wheat, those are the things that are in the kingdom also, but they are of the kingdom because they share the same character as God on that. So the key thing is they're right beside each other. So I want to apply that to assets, to financial markets, to your 401k, your kid's college savings account, any of these things that we're doing on that. I'll share a quote. This was from Billy Graham. He believed at the end of his life that one of the next great moves of God would happen in the marketplace, in business. And, we are certainly seeing that. I'm hearing more and more people talk about this. Pastors, entrepreneurs, business owners of the workplace, and we're talking about investing, but the markets they're such a ripe field. To where there is ecclesia there, where investments, capital in your own retirement accounts can work to expand the kingdom. And so we've talked about the third great awakening. We're seeing a lot of that. I'm going to share some cool stories on what's happening there. So let me skip ahead here. Billy talked about that this morning. I'm going to skip that. There's really three types of resources when we talk about managing stewardship. I call it the 3 A's: assets, access, and ability. Today we're primarily going to talk about assets. I talk about access and abilities in some other workshops, but assets. So assets are things that are under your control, under your stewardship, but you get to make a conscious decision on what that asset does. So whether you invest in gold, or you invest in NVIDIA, or a mutual fund, or 401k, or real estate, you get to choose the stewardship of that. I want to share a few studies that have come out. This was about 3 years ago. Christianity Today did a study. They estimated there was $30 trillion in the U.S. in assets that were controlled by either Christian individuals or Christian organizations. And this was in the capital markets of stocks and bonds. So I'm not talking about real estate in this particular survey. Now, what they found in this survey was that only about $260 billion, which is about 1%, a little more than 1%, only around, let's just say less than 2% of that money was in any way stewarded, directed, managed, supervised, whatever word we want to use, with any type of faith framework. Right? And so a lot of when Billy and I came together at WealthBuilders Investments, we wanted to be part of this growing group in the financial services industry that wants to change this. And I'll show you a couple other stats. That one's got too many numbers. Let's go to this one. This was a great study. It was put out by Eventide, which is an asset manager in Boston, which is a Christian-owned mutual fund company. Very good money manager. They wanted to find out what's going on in the financial advisor community in our world. They surveyed and found out that 9 out of 10 financial advisors do not broach the subject of faith-based investing with their clients. Shocking. And usually if they do, it's only because the client said, hey, can you tell me about values-based? I went to this thing at Billy Epperhart's, or I read this book. Most of it is because in the financial services world, it's human nature. You get comfortable with where you are and what's working for you, and you just don't go into new things. And some of it can also be a hesitation on the financial advisor's part to potentially do what? Why would someone in my shoes not tell you about values-based, faith-based investing? Who? I might lose clients. Fear of man. And so that's been the challenge for me of some of these things, I just need to tell them to you, and you can now take it to God on how to handle that, right? Because some of these truths have to be shared, but many advisors, they don't want to cross that bridge because, well, oh gosh, if I say anything about godly marriage or abortion, or if I talk about, most people don't support human trafficking, they just indirectly support it without knowing about it. But that would just take a lot of work, and I might offend some people, and that might affect my revenue. So that's a large part of what we're doing. And so I want to encourage you, if you're working with a financial advisor, ask the tough questions. And if you don't get answers that are satisfactory, we'd encourage you to come talk to WealthBuilders Investments, because our whole team, this is our focus, is we do all the same services that Edward Jones, Merrill Lynch, Northwestern Mutual, all those houses, except we do it with a Christ-centered focus on how we're going to invest the money, which is what we're going to jump into now. I've got a lot more stats, but I'm going to skip some of those for time's sake. I told you I had a lot of stats in here. All right, let's talk about media and content. I have more to say on this in the next workshop right after this, but this is not shocking to you. There's a huge war in the media universe against faith, family, and values. And at the top, I will talk about these companies at the next session. These are both companies we have personally invested in, Angel Studios and the Wonder Project. Does anyone recognize either of those company names? The Chosen, House of David, Season 2. I'm going to talk about that next session, so let me stay focused here. NBC and Disney, right? I mean, there's many more media companies, but there is this collision of values between these companies. Now, NBC and Disney, they have a lot of shareholders. They have a lot of shareholders to report to. This is an older slide, but I'm an NFL football fan, and last football season, the quarterback for the Houston Texans, won the game. I think it was Monday Night Football or something. And in his interview, he gave glory actually to Jesus. He said the name Jesus in a live interview. And C.J. Stroud, right? Am I correct? Is that okay? Is he on your fantasy team, Josh? Okay. It's a good fantasy quarterback. So C.J. Stroud gave glory to Jesus. That was the interview. And then NBC scrubbed it, took it out, put it out on social media. Created a huge uproar for that. I want to make sure that every Christian that has dollars in the stock market does not have money in these type of companies. Why? Because why do we want to support their agenda that is just against faith and family? Okay, now we're going to really talk some stuff. So Netflix, this gentleman, Wade Davis, is the Vice President of Inclusion Strategies at Netflix. And he was part of the team that created several shows. Netflix's Transformers Earthspark came under fire for pushing the term non-binary, despite being geared to children as young as 7. Another movie from Netflix, Monster High, the movie, features teenage characters explaining their preferred pronouns. Further, where was the one I really wanted to talk about here? Here's a list of some of these shows. That was my notes there. This is some of the ones. Babysitter Club. I was actually asking my 16-year-old son about it. He had heard about it. We don't have Netflix, but he had told me, oh yeah, they shame each other for using pronouns and things like that. So Netflix stock took a huge dive because one of my favorite people. I kind of like this guy. I do not drive a Tesla. I do own Tesla stock, but I do not drive a Tesla. But he came out on social media and saying, hey, this is not okay to have a show called Dead End Paranormal Park that shows characters coming in and out of trans that's targeting young children, 12 and under. And then there was the Strawberry Shortcake, Barry in the Big City, that promoted transgender drag queens. So those are some of my shows. So I have a 7-year-old daughter. How many of you have children or grandchildren 12 or under in the room? That's not okay. Now, what if I told you that your retirement account, your college savings account, was invested in that company? So if you're just investing in the stock market indexes, I'm 90% sure that you are in these companies. I'm just picking on Netflix because this just came out last month. So I got plenty of material out there. I can just recycle, whoever the culprits are on that. But There are other choices. I'm going to talk about it in my next workshop. There's plenty of conservative values media that's not crappy. It's not low budget stuff. Who doesn't love Nate Bargatze? I mean, and what about Wild Robot? Now, I'm not saying every show has to be a Bible story. What I'm saying is that there's good media that's secular conservative values. Now, I love House of David. It's a little too graphic for my wife. Right, it's a little Lord of the Rings, meets the Old Testament. But there's plenty of good media out there that a lot of companies are putting out that they just don't cross that line into all of these issues of taking a stand or having to speak out on all these issues. I'm going to talk about this in the next workshop. There's plenty of stories that share the light, and yes, some of them do. Happen to be the chosen, but there's other ones that are not. They're just good, clean film and movie. And I guess Kelly and I were old enough now where I do remember some of that from my youth, where I'm like, it didn't used to be like this when I turned on NBC. It was not like that. So here's the point, and I'm going to transition to what's happening in the boardroom of some of these public companies. The point here is, in your investment accounts, I want to encourage you to look and see if you're supporting any of these media companies. Now, I'll give you a cheat sheet here at the end on how you can have a little reference guide that you can go back and look. And there's better ways to invest these portfolios that still get you the financial returns you're shooting for retirement and college without supporting these values. All right, let's talk about a second subject. I want to talk about what happens in the boardroom for shareholders. So how many of you, can we agree that when you buy, how many of you have owned stocks or mutual funds, ETFs? Okay. So when you buy those shares, can we agree that you are an owner of those shares? Sure. Okay. So you're an owner of those shares, and those shares own stock in a company. Right? Now, if you own the shares, if you own Google directly, you own Google shares directly. You get a proxy to vote. If you own it through a mutual fund or an ETF, there's a manager that gets your vote, gets your ballot, and then they will vote your ballot when Google goes to their next shareholder meeting, or Netflix, or whoever it is on that. So I want to talk to you about this. This is something that financial advisors do not educate their clients on. One, because it takes time, it's technical, and it is sometimes gets in the way of other things we want to do. So there are three roles when you are a shareholder in a mutual fund, 401k, IRA, 529 plan. First of all, you're choosing to invest, right? I mean, you are, okay, yeah, got it. There's a menu, or your advisor presents you a menu. You're making a selection. Most financial advisors and most retail investors, which we would be considered retail investors, we stop after step one, right? Because step one's all about, well, I need diversification and asset allocation and risk-adjusted return and beta and theta and da-da-da-da-da-da. We stop there. However, the secret sauce is you actually get rights to vote after you do number one, and you also have the ability to advocate. Now, what the liberal left has done very good is they know how to get together and advocate for what they want to stand for. The conservative right, I would say, struggles with that at times, a little more siloed approach to it. But we're just talking about investing right now in Wall Street companies. So if you want to take a holistic approach to investing, what we do at WealthBuilders Investments is we're going to do all three. We're going to make an investment selection, which I'm going to go into next. But we also are going to be involved in voting for our values. And we're also going to be involved in actually having a voice or advocating for things that we might want. We've actually starting to work with a third party that's all they do is talk to boards of public companies. Now, what do you think happens if you do not vote or advocate for your money? Who is going to do the voting and advocating? Who will do it?
People with an agenda.
Those guys. BlackRock is one, if not top two, largest How many trillions do they have now, Josh? I mean, it's trillions, over 10. One of the largest asset managers in the world, BlackRock, they are a publicly traded company. They are voting and advocating many Christian conservatives' shares that are owned in IRAs, 401ks. Why? Because you didn't know that you could. And that's the trick. A little bait and switch. We've got good mutual funds, ETFs, we have advisors, and then we're going to get your dollars, we're going to do the voting and the advocacy. That's why so many boardrooms are very liberal now, is because there's not enough conservatives saying, well, hey, I like that company. I like JP Morgan Chase. It's a great bank. I love the CEO. But why are they not supporting conservative values in the decisions they're making on that? That is slowly changing. Now, one thing that for most of us in the conservative movement, and I'm just going to keep going here, is we can look at what happened with Charlie Kirk and Turning Point. There are groups out there that advocate that Christian people are of the devil, right? That, they're heretics, they're Hitler and all that. So I'm going to share with you one of the research firms that I work with. His name's Jerry Boyer. And how many of you have heard of Southern Poverty Law Center? So they are largely responsible. There are a handful of groups that put together just media communication to create just to create hate on people who don't agree with their values. Now, I know this through talking with Jerry. This was actually some excerpts from him. But, what they do is they portray Christians as an existential threat to democracy, right? I mean, you see this everywhere. And it's like, well, no, we just want to speak up for conservative values and First and Second Amendment rights and biblical values on that. So a lot of the violence we've seen has been through some of this ideology that gets spread. So would you like to know what public companies have paid money to this organization? I just asked ChatGPT. I didn't do that much research. What Jerry Boyer, who we're engaging on advocacy, has told me, he was personal friends with Charlie Kirk. He said, we are putting together, in fact, this is his quote at the bottom. He said he is putting together a group of shareholders who are like us, who want to have a commitment to free speech and viewpoint diversity. Okay, we can have viewpoint diversity in the country to launch a wave of shareholder proposals to companies like this that are giving dollars to agencies. They're just creating hate and divisiveness and not even allowing for just public discourse on, hey, you believe this, I believe that. We can still work together, right, on that. So I can't tell you that these are the exact companies he's going to target. I just know this is what ChatGPT told me has donated to Southern Poverty Law. So there's this type of data that's out here. These are all public companies. The Human Rights Campaign, these are all public companies. I know it's small print, sorry. These are the top public companies that have a perfect 100 score in the HRC score. For a conservative values person with a Judeo-Christian worldview, that is not a positive thing. That means those companies are aiming to be a 100-point score on all the ideology that is against the Bible, that's against God and family, and this is just a public search. This is all available. I just went to their website and said, "Hey, tell me who's got the 100 score." I'm on that. So, what does this mean, Chad? What this means is that if we're going to put together a stock market portfolio, what we do at Wealth Builders is we're going to take out these companies, and then we're going to go look for companies that have really good financial returns, strong balance sheets, they've been around for a while, they either have good growth prospects or they have good dividends, and we're going to build a portfolio around them because we would rather not align with these. So these are many of the companies. I don't have to, keep beating them up on that. But certainly we don't want to, I don't want to say for my kids' college with companies that are anti-family. I mean, that is just like the ultimate conflict in my opinion. So let me give you a case study. I love Coke Zero. I won't lie. Kelly will let me have it occasionally, especially if I'm on an airplane. Get me a Coke Zero. So let me tell you the story of two different Cokes. Coca-Cola, the parent company, is based in Atlanta, Georgia. And then there's also this other, and publicly traded under the symbol KO. And then there's this other company called Coca-Cola Consolidated, based in Charlotte, North Carolina. Trades in the symbol COKE. Now, I will tell you that the Atlanta-based Coca-Cola is the largest shareholder of Coca-Cola Consolidated. But Coca-Cola Consolidated is the largest independent bottler of all of the Coke products. Bottling business is a huge industry. I mean, it's a very profitable, scalable business. Coca-Cola Consolidated, over 300 brands, 60 million consumers. They're mainly in the Southeast is where this bottling company is. They're publicly traded. You want to know the big difference between them? This is what Coca-Cola Consolidated's website says. It says, this is a publicly traded company. Our purpose is to honor God in all we do, to serve others, to pursue excellence, and to grow profitably. And then they list out some other core values on that. So you can't tell me that because you're a publicly traded company that you can't express your values. It all starts with the CEO and the board. Now, how good of a company is that? Do they suffer? They actually have really high employee retention because they have things like corporate chaplaincy and benevolence funds. They have a true ecclesia at this major corporation. And the financial returns on this stock are not bad. Now, I'm being recorded, so I'll tell you that past performance is no guarantee of future results. I'm not giving you investment advice, but I'm just looking at the numbers. So Coca-Cola, total shareholder return in 2024 is 40%. Over the last 5 years, 400%. And they just did a 10-for-1 stock split. I would say that their approach to running a bottling company and using kingdom values is working out. Would you? Absolutely. So we do own this in our portfolio. We like them. They're doing a lot to educate other CEOs on how you can run a profitable public company that's listed on the New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ and have really good employee retention because you care for your people. You're not pushing Christianity on them. You're just loving them and taking care of them. And do really well for the shareholders. There are shareholders who are not Christians, but they love Coke Consolidated because their mission and vision results in really strong financial success. All right, I've talked about companies to boycott. Here are some publicly traded companies, and I'm going to give you a way to get the whole list. Coke Consolidated is there at the top. We've put together a portfolio of 50 or 60 public companies that do not violate biblical values, that have really good financial success. So, UPS, hey, what can Brown do for you? I'm just saying, I love UPS. Progressive Insurance, who doesn't love those commercials, right? I mean, Tesla, I do secretly want one. Broadcom's a great company, very similar to NVIDIA. Newmont is a gold mining. Who owns gold? They're procuring it, one of the public companies. Caterpillar, there's probably some Caterpillars out here. With all the work being done. So what I want to encourage you is there's a lot of public companies that do not violate our values that we can invest in. And I'm going to skip that. I'm going to show you this. This was a study done by a portfolio manager we work with. I know it's small print, but this blue line is just the stock market. Had a 13% annualized return over the last 10 years. The study's a few years old. Feel free to take a picture of this. This is a good one. And then what this company did, Sovereigns did it, they extracted all these companies I'm talking to you about, these faith-driven, CEO-led companies. And what they found was they took out 125 that were Christian companies, publicly traded, and those companies had about a 20% annualized rate of return. Let's see, do you like that better or that better? I like that better, okay. And then what about this one? Then they took the most spiritually integrated, the Coke Consolidateds, that had chaplaincy and benevolence funds and Bible studies. Oh, you can do Bible study? Oh, yeah, we have lawyers. Oh, okay. They took those and found that those top 50 over the last 10 years had an annual shareholder return of 23% per year. So the lie from the enemy is you can't make money in the stock market if you're not invested in Facebook, Google, Microsoft on that. I'm going to wrap it up here. You have to come back because I didn't get to cover everything. So let me just kind of land the plane with this. What we've done at Wealth Builders is we've created a premier equity portfolio where we've taken all this data. We've worked with some different third-party companies to create a stock portfolio that you can invest in inside of your IRA, your 401k, your brokerage account, whatever. And it has the companies that we feel do not violate values, but that have really good long-term financial success and are well diversified. Now, I can't tell you, I can't guarantee any kind of performance, but I mean, I could show you a sample of what type of returns. I think I've already proven it to you, but a portfolio like this that has faith-driven companies, or at least companies that are not anti-Christian, right? I'm okay with NVIDIA. They're not a Christian-run company, but they don't take the stance that a lot of these other companies do, right? So again, these portfolios can do really good. All this tells you is that this keeps pace with the market or does a little bit better on that. So let me end with this. You stop by our booth, and then you should have this flyer in your welcome swag bag. We want to encourage you to give your money a voice. And so we have the full Pro Values Guide. If you scan that QR code, I've kind of given you 10 or 12 of the names. This list, I think, has like 60 of the companies. It'll show you the ones we invest in, the ones we specifically do not invest in. So you can snap that QR code. You put in your email, you'll get the full report. And stop by our booth, and if we can help you think through, hey, how can you help me analyze what I'm doing with my current investments, we would be honored to do that. Our team will be around here and at the table. And then for my next session, I'll be talking about investments that help solve the world's greatest problems. So with that, I'll dismiss you to go on your break into the next workshop. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for joining me today on the Kingdom Finance Show. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe and leave us a review. It really helps to get the word out. For more resources on becoming a Kingdom investor and to connect with us directly, visit our website at wealthbuilders.net. That's wealthbuilders.net. We'll see you next time on the Kingdom Finance Show. The content provided is for educational purposes only. We encourage you to seek personalized investment advice from your financial professional. For all tax and legal advice, please consult your CPA or attorney. Investment advisory services are offered through Authentic Counsel, a registered investment advisor. Securities are offered through Cabin Securities, a registered broker-dealer. The content of this podcast does not constitute an offer of securities. Offerings can only be made through an offering memorandum, and you should carefully examine risk factors and other information contained in the memorandum.